Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to miamighostchronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogmen, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mppellicer.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. So, how are you guys doing? How's everybody doing? Happy Halloween 2024. This is our fourth year for doing the Hollywood Halloween thing. And of course, this is Henry. All right. And yeah, it's I'm not doing the live broadcast because, as you know, we live in Florida and we got like, how's this, between this what was it, Milton, and the other one, Helene. Because even though we just got like Helene traveled up the coast, we got some strong winds, and believe it or not, preparing for stuff like this is kind of exhausting because, let's face it, you get hyped up. Like I said, I grew up in South Florida where we had hurricanes, but I'll tell you right now, the media, the weather channels did not do this type of over prep, scaring the what out of everybody. It was like, I remember we used to have like when the lights would go out, we were prepared. We had a little transistor battery thing and hurricane lamps, and yeah, obviously by the time you realize but it's not like these days and days of anticipation. So even when you're like, no, it's gonna be close, but not really, you start thinking, what if it's not? It's so weird, and of course they hype up that this is such an unusual hurricane season, and I'm like, God. So anyway, bottom line, the point is that because of that, we were like, well, you know what? Better to do a pre-recorded Halloween than a live one, but here it is. Oh, and by the way, this is how you know it's Halloween. I only bring this out, okay, when it's Halloween, because otherwise it's like an exorcist cat. Yeah. Let me tell you something. You want to make a bunch of little dogs run? Show them this, which we did it the first time we got it. But guess what? I want to show you also a new addition to the family. This is Morticia, okay? And Morticia, we were at a friend's house that lives. Okay, wait, move. Oh yeah, you got to put it on both ends. And he lives like on 10 acres, but he lives out in the middle of nowhere, the boonies. And we're walking around because he has some exotics. This is Morticia. It's a little black kitten, and he has like an old what was an 18-wheeler container where he keeps some stuff, and we're thinking that the mom went in there and had a bunch of kittens, but she was wandering around, no mommy in sight, no other kittens in sight, nothing. We tried putting her back in there, and I guess she must have been really hungry. She even fell out one time, and I was like, and he's like looking at me, don't worry, mom's gonna show up, and I'm like, but you're not sure, right? In other words, the little kitten did an appearance right at the right time in front of the right person. Me. I'm not going to say him because he was telling me, put the cat back, put the kitten back. Leave her there. The mom's going to come for it. And I'm like, and I even went in there. I climbed into this container, and I was thinking, maybe I'll hear the other kittens and I'll just leave it there. No such thing. So here she is with us. And I've been feeding her with this, as you could tell. Look at this. Okay, I just fed her, maybe, which is why she's not. Because usually, yeah. Oh my God. Oh, that milk. Okay, here you go. I'm not gonna feed her now all the time. We pre-fed her, so because if not,
You will have an accompaniment. Man, and she doesn't. Be careful, Henry. Put her in there. We're guesstimating that she's about maybe a little bit over 2 weeks old. Her eyes are open, and her teeth are just starting to break through. Okay, so of course, because I know there's people going, "You're not feeding her milk." No, this is kitten replacement milk. This is special milk that they sell for kittens. So because obviously she can't eat solids and stuff like that. So yeah, she's something fierce. When she's hungry, she's like, "Give me more." But yeah, that's our Halloween. That was our Halloween gift. Well, the Halloween gift I gave myself. How's that?
Foster.
No. So anyway, yeah, and again, her name is Morticia because what more appropriate thing that you could get than around Halloween and a black cat. So yes, that's our new addition to the Stories of the Supernatural family. And what can I say? And all the my dogs are looking at me the first time they were like, "Huh?" They didn't know what to make of it. All right, and of course I have her in a crate, which they can't get to just in case. But they pretty much calm down, but I still don't trust them. But yeah, they're keeping it in stride as far as the new addition to the family. Like, what now, lady? What did you bring? Chickens, guineas, exotic, and now a cat? Yeah, what can I say? I mean, before, when I lived in Miami, my cats that I had were rescue cats, and I would go jogging. It was a big park with trails, and there was at one point there was feral cats there because people started dumping them, and I found a couple of kittens that I don't know what happened to the mom. I went one day and I heard it. The next day I came and it's still there, the kitten. And the two of my rescues were from that park, and I had them for years and years and years. I got them operated, of course, spayed, and yep. So this is not a first time for me that a kitten comes and falls into my lap, if you know what I mean. Anyway, considering that it's Halloween, okay, Henry's gonna have some stories to tell you, at least one, if we get around to it. And this time I was thinking, well, what could we get into? And I said, wait a minute. There's people that Halloween, or the motif for Halloween, this is a year-round thing for them. And I started looking into having to do with music and the devil. And, I was surprised. I mean, because, everybody knows that there's, a lot of, there's a lot of groups that do, what's the word I'm looking for? They just, they're known for being, what do you call it? They go for it to be public attention. What is it? Shock, that shock thing. Yeah. But then you find out that there's some of these acts where it's not like this is their act when they're doing whatever they're doing, and then once they're normal life, then they become something else. I was very surprised to know that, and you're going to see. And what's really unusual, because this is, like I said, this is not just groups that put on face paint or garish stuff and they look. No, I'm talking here. What am I looking? The groups or the members that actually this is their life. This is how they live their lives all the time. Outside of the arena, of the stage. Okay, now, as you can tell, like I said, it's not unusual, and in this case we're gonna go towards I'm talking here about rock music, heavy metal, black metal, stuff like that. And like I said, it's not unusual to pair rock music with the devil, especially heavy metal music. Now, the first that come to mind are Black Sabbath, Kiss, and performers like Alice Cooper, who lean heavily on the imagery of the occult. And as far as these are just by appearances, but I'm sure maybe some of you have heard that there is something among musicians and performers known as a 27 Club. All right, now, this is a death list of actors, musicians, artists, and athletes who have died at the age of 27. The majority have died as a result of suicide, substance abuse, homicide, and strange accidents. Now, many claim there's a significance tied to the number of their age to Illuminati and occult groups. In other words, this is more than bad luck or bad life choices. How's that? Now, of course, this is a far cry from when, when Elvis was doing his hip gyration, and they were thought that, man, that's the work of the devil. I mean, when you look at, Elvis's stuff on stage, it's pretty tame. It's like, that's nothing. He was just being sexy and driving the girls wild. But there was nothing occult going on. In other words, this is a big, giant difference from what I'm talking about. Now, like I was saying, the 27 Club, all right, is a number that is sacred to Satanists and Saturnists, and included in worldwide rituals that outsiders are unaware of. These ceremonies are practiced in secret at the highest levels of church and state. The cube is the perfect representation of the number 27, expressed as 3 times 3 times 3, with identical factors grouped in 3. According to some, the number of the beast, the 666, should be turned upside down as the cross is reversed in Satanism, which then gives the number 999. Those digits whose digits added together equals 27. Okay, 3 times 3 is 9 times 3 is 27. Or in the case of when you turn it upside down, then instead of multiplication, it's addition. All right, now, other comparisons that are made as to the symbology of 27 is there are 27 chapters in the Bible's New Testament. There are 27 letters, the Kabbalah, 27 channels to God, and 27 names for God according to the Bible. Now, when you look at some of these things or some of these ideas, they're like, well, that's weird. Yeah, okay, whatever, coincidence. But then when you look, and you're going to see, I'm going to go now first into the 27 Club, all right? Then you think, what are the odds? And now, I'm not a statistician, but I think that if somebody would do the math, the odds on it are like, okay, was it just because you were into drugs? But see, there's a lot of these musicians that, I'm going to give you an example, one that I mentioned earlier, Ozzy Osbourne with Black Sabbath. When he came out, he was pretty dark, and he was accused of, and here he is. He's like a mumbling old guy, but he's lived, and he's, believe, he doesn't do drugs anymore. I don't think he does drugs, but he's lived into old age. So that you could say, well, Marlene, these people from the 27 Club, they were victims of their own lifestyle, of their choices of who they hung out with. Maybe. But some of them you're going to see as we get into this, that it was more than just that. What is it? Being at the wrong place at the wrong time. Now, the first one that we're going to look at, this predates all the rock and roll deaths that started like in the 60s. And there's one musician, and his name is Robert Johnson, and his story dates back to the 1930s. He was born the illegitimate child of a farmhand in Mississippi in 1911. His mother was married to another man, but her husband fled the area to Memphis due to his own romantic peccadillos. Most of their 10 children eventually ended up with him. His mother remarried when he was 7 years old, Robert Johnson's mom. Johnson married when he was 17 years old, but by the time he was 19, his 14-year-old wife had died in childbirth, and he turned back to music. Though he was persistent in playing at juke joints and other places, he just wasn't well received, and he left town. By the way, he was 17, his wife was 14, all right? And from what I understand, her family, when they saw him with a guitar, they themselves said this is the devil's thing. But to make a long story short, his wife is pregnant and dies in childbirth along with his child. From what I understand, before that, he had been playing the guitar. He was playing the guitar, but he was okay. And there was even comments. They would go to all these places, like smaller places where all these blues guitarists, they would play, and he was trying to, of course, get a mentor back then to learn how to play better, because remember, most of these guys are self-taught. And there's other people that that they've interviewed afterwards because of doing biographies on him or research. They were saying they would hear, get him off the stage, he's bad, like, what do you get him out, like, in other words, when his wife got pregnant, dies, he doesn't play, and even when he comes back, he's like, he's not cutting it. In other words, he's just okay, but nothing to write home about. And this is where the story gets interesting for Johnson. Okay, now he leaves town, and he reappears a few months later, and the same guy who'd been booed off stage now sounds like an expert blues guitarist. He was supposed to have gained his skills after he made a deal with the devil. Supposedly, everything changed after he went to a crossroads at Highway 49 and 61 at the Dockery Plantation. I believe this is in Mississippi. This was where he sold his soul in exchange for mastery over the guitar. In 1936, he recorded his first single, Terraplane Blues, and before he could really enjoy his new fame, he died on August 16, 1938. It would take 30 years before his death certificate was found, and it did not list a cause of death, and no autopsy had been performed on the body. The reason for the death at the age of 27, here we go, this is our first number, 27, is varied, including a belief he was poisoned by a jealous husband. Many years after his death, someone checked the back of his death certificate and found a note saying the owner of the plantation where Johnson died thought he'd been killed by syphilis. Most likely it was congenital syphilis, which occurs when a mother with untreated syphilis passes the infection to her baby during pregnancy or at birth. And I was reading that, maybe his mom had syphilis, passed it on to him as a child, and there's certain things that come with that health-wise. Even now, no one knows exactly where Robert Johnson was buried, because really at the time he had just, in other words, his fame came more or less after he died. So there was nobody there to find out, hey, how did he really die? Was he poisoned by a jealous husband? Did he really just, remember, he's just 27 years old. What exactly happened? So he got buried. Nobody knows where, because remember, back then, even then, it would take at least a little bit of money to get a grave digger, and if you're lucky, a coffin, and even luckier to get a headstone. That was the reality of, when people weren't rich or they lived in, sometimes, first of all, if you were lucky, you would end up in a cemetery. That's number one. Of course, the cemetery would charge you, we're talking here 1930s, would charge you to have a grave digger come and dig a hole. Then there was the cost of a coffin, and even a simple wooden coffin would cost money. All right. And then, if you were lucky, again, if you got a wooden cross, which of course with time deteriorates, it would take more money. Not that much, but what we think of, but for somebody that's in straitened circumstances, if there was a marker a long time ago, that thing disappeared. So of course, bottom line, fast forward now to almost 100 years later, nobody really truly knows how he died, why he died of, and where he's buried, even though they have like 3 different markers. Everybody that has a theory of where he was buried has set up a marker there. At the end of the day, and everybody has their own reason or why they think that he's buried there or something like that. And of course, sometimes I think that all boils down to, how do you make money, honey? All right. So, whatever the real cause, whispers swirled that the devil came to collect his end of the deal sooner than Johnston anticipated. All right. As a matter of fact, interestingly enough, one of the lyrics from his song, Me and the Devil Blues, are, quote, "Early this morning when you knocked upon my door and I said, hello, Satan, I believe it's time to go," end quote. So there you go. I wonder why people would think that that you sold your soul to the devil for musical expertise. But even before Robert Johnson, there was another musician. He didn't die at the age of 27, but he was another musician who was believed to have met with the devil in exchange for fame for playing not just the guitar, excelling in it. All right. Now, he was rumored to have made a deal with the devil, and his name was Tommy Johnson. He was no relation to Robert Johnson. First of all, he was known for his falsetto voice and complex guitar parts. According to his brother, Liddell Johnson, he went to a lonely crossroads before midnight. A big black man came up to him, took the guitar, and tuned it. After this, just like Robert Johnson, his playing excelled. The selling of his soul for talent was also reported by David Evans in his 1971 biography of Johnson. Like Robert Johnson, he was born in Mississippi and around 1914 was playing at local parties with his brother. In 1916, he moved close to the Dockery plantation where Robert Johnson years later was said to have made his unholy pact. Tommy Johnson died in 1956. All right. So they were like doing the same circuit of the blues out there in the area, I guess, of Mississippi. The only thing is this one, he outlived him. He wasn't a 27. But let's fast forward about 40 years, and it's the 1960s. And many, because they really don't look at this thing with the Johnson, with the Robert Johnson thing as part of the 27 Club, even though technically he was. But anyway, high-profile musician who died during the 1960s was Brian Jones, and he was a guitarist and a little-known founder of the Rolling Stones. Now, his leadership role in the band was overshadowed by Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, who partnered to write songs. Jones suffered from alcoholism and an addiction to drugs, especially cocaine. In June 1969, he was fired and replaced by Mick Taylor. Less than a month later, he was found dead in his swimming pool in what seemed an accidental drowning. Even after so many years, the 27-year-old's death is still shrouded in mystery. The site of his death was Cotchford Farm, built in the 16th century. It was at one time the home of A.A. Milne, the author of Winnie the Pooh, which is really funny because you go from something as innocent as Winnie the Pooh, and then in the 60s you have a rock and roll guy that ends up dying, with a bad addiction and ends up either dying or maybe killed. If you look at some of the evidence, some people don't think it was accidental. Anyway, his initial cause of death was listed as drowning, then changed to death by misadventure. He had some drugs and beer in his system and fresh water in his lungs. However, it's believed that someone like him who had a high tolerance for drugs and alcohol and was a good swimmer would not have died in the pool. Some suspect he was drowned in a trough of water near the garden. Biologists who examined his death record find that the stresses on his tissue and heart indicated he knew he was being murdered. I guess that point is like this guy didn't, slip into some type of drug-induced never and just went underwater and died. Like he just, apparently they're saying that there was some type of stress involved that he was aware of, that he was conscious of. Now, police opened and closed investigation to Jones' death 3 times. On the day before his death, Jones had kicked out a crew of construction workers who supposedly were on the farm to maintain it, but were instead freeloading off Jones. Supposedly, Frank Thorogood, who headed the construction crew, confessed in 1993 on his deathbed that he did kill Jones, but nothing was done officially. I didn't have time to really go into the story of what he said on his deathbed and why it was never followed up on. Maybe it was if he died shortly afterwards. Nobody could question him as to okay, you're saying you're confessing to this, but give us information, let's say, that only somebody who was there would know. Maybe that was it. I don't know. And of course, remember, you cannot prosecute somebody posthumously. You can't do that after the fact. You can say we think, or even now with cold cases and DNA, DNA points that this is the person, but you can't prosecute a dead person, a dead man. Anyway, Now, present day, all the players in the affair are dead, and definite answers will never be supplied, unless somebody finds some diary or some letter that dates back to that time. I don't see that the definitive answer as to where Brian Jones, if he was killed, if it was suicide, even that's also a possibility, or it was accidental. It looks like it's going to remain a mystery. Now, the next one we're going to look at, I had never heard of this guy, but, you know, even afterwards, I mean, sometimes, even if a band predates your birth or even before, you hear about them, but I had never heard of this guy. But his name was Alan Wilson, but they used to call him Blind Al because he had really, really bad vision. And he was a co-founder and lead singer of blues band Canned Heat. He dies on September 3rd, 1970, at the age of 27, due to a heart attack, likely caused by a combination of factors including his heavy smoking and poor health. Wilson suffered from anxiety and depression. According to some, he had a couple of suicide attempts. Yeah. Some sources say he never actually tried to commit suicide, and these were simply assumptions made after his death by some who knew him. But let me tell you, I was reading more into it, and this guy had mental health problems. He suffered from insomnia and started to use the barbiturate secobarbital, or Reds, as they were known on the street. In the summer of 1969, Wilson was hospitalized for depression. Wilson was hospitalized again in the spring of 1970, as Canned Heat was scheduled to record an album with John Lee Hooker. Wilson reportedly attempted to drive his car off a freeway in Los Angeles, getting an injury at the top of his head. So this man is like, and what they did was they released him from the hospital, and he was with a guy that was tied with a band, but under his supervision. Like, he slept out on a tent behind the guy's house in Topanga Canyon. All right, this is the only way. Like, in other words, he was doing like an outpatient kind of scenario. So this is September 2nd, 1970. All right. Now, think about this. September 1970, and Brian Jones is like the year before, September of 1969. So we're here going, we're in that same maybe 12 months or a little bit afterwards. But anyway, September 2nd, 1970, the band Canned Heat, they're scheduled to leave for Germany to begin a European tour. And when he misses his September 2 flight, this didn't raise any alarms. The reason was that he didn't like to fly. So his bandmates were used to him doing stuff like this, that he would not go with them, or he would, like, one of these things. I guess he had to talk himself into it. So September 3rd rolls around next day, and I guess somebody goes to, like, hey, go find him. Where is this guy? And they find that he's dead in a sleeping bag on a hillside in Topanga Canyon in California, which is where he often slept. Again, he's 27 years old. Now, an autopsy identified his manner and cause of death as accidental acute barbiturate intoxication. Some believe it was suicide, but he left no note, and there were 4 pills left in his pants found next to his body. You know what? Maybe it would have been suicide. Not everybody that commits suicide leaves a note. Maybe he had more pills in case some he took didn't work. Who knows? Maybe he just didn't want to get on that plane. Again, that 27. So then 2 weeks later, all right, just a bare 2 weeks later, guess whose turn it is? Jimi Hendrix. He's found dead in his London flat. And of course, he's 27. He's one of the most well-known of the 27 Club members. Due to the mix of drugs and alcohol in his system, his cause of death was ruled accidental. All right. And this is one of the things that that people don't, and then I know some of these people used to shoot up heroin. They would do a mix, and this is what some of the things that you come across. All these musicians, they were living life in the fast lane is an understatement. They're doing concerts, they're hanging out with people, and you're going to see there's always a thread of were people giving them, in other words, they were killed, but indirectly. Either somebody was giving them too many drugs to take, or even the bad stuff, or in some cases, I hate to say it because a lot of people can't see if you are living this, what to the outside world looks like the best life, you're famous, you're a rock and roll star, you're touring all, let's say in the case of a man, you've got all the women, everybody wants to be your friend and everybody wants to have sex with you. And people from looking out from the outside are like, man, that's a great life. Who wouldn't want that? Who would want to leave this life if you've got that going on? Remember, sometimes a lot of these people, their drug addiction, a lot of times people see it as in, oh, this was the lifestyle. A lot of these people had drug addictions because they had trauma in their background. In other words, before they became famous, and of course went into the permissive drug abuse scenarios that you find in the 60s, that experimentations, LSD, all that crazy stuff. So I think that that's why, and of course they have no choice to, because how can you prove it otherwise, to think that some of these famous musicians at the height of their fame choose to, call it quits, suicide. Also the fact that some of these people think when I become famous, everybody applauds and thinks I'm the best thing, I'm going to be happy. Whatever I've got making me unhappy is going to go away. Guess what? They find out it's not. So anyway, here's Jimi Hendrix, 27, dead by accidental. 2 weeks later, and that 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, Janis Joplin, all right? She's another one that she is, again, she's at the height of her fame. She's found dead in a Hollywood motel room. Her death was attributed to a suspected heroin overdose along with alcohol intake. Now, Joplin's tour manager later found out of other heroin users who had bought their supplies from the same dealer and had also overdosed. This is why I was saying that sometimes it's not a question of accidental per se or suicide. In some cases, they were just given drugs that were not good. I mean, were either off or mixed or something. And you know what? The other day they were, oh my God, who was I listening to the other day? What's the name of this gentleman that just OD'd? That used to be on Friends. God, Marlene. Okay, I know. Why is my name? He just died. Like maybe he had a he had for several years. Matthew Perry. There we go. Matthew Perry. Okay. Matthew Perry was known to have a drug problem. Supposedly he had cleaned out, and he even wrote a book about it, about being sober and all this stuff. And he's making the circuit. He's appearing in shows. Now it turns out that this guy was not clean. This guy was doing drugs, which he was ODing. Now, the commentary I had heard was, and which, by the way, that observation I think is very important, and it relates that they were looking into who supplied him with those drugs as far as trying to prosecute and arrest. I'm not sure if they did. I believe there was an arrest tied into supposedly his supplier. Okay. And it's kind of hypocritical as a point I'm trying to make, because they say there's a bunch of people that OD and die from bad drugs. And if you're a nobody, in other words, nobody goes looking for your supplier. But if you're a somebody, like an actor, then the police department and the prosecutors at DA's office, then they fall over themselves to find out, hey, who was supplying this person, or who was a connection, and trying. In other words, they're looking at the person that originated with drugs for murder charges. And I don't know exactly how they would do that, because he didn't actually kill him, but you kill him. But you don't ever see that. I have never heard, and you hear all the time about people, young people, ODing, taking bad drugs. You never hear about the police saying, hey, we need to find out who was the supplier who caused this death. But my point being that if you're somebody, then you get all the attention. If you're nobody, too bad for you. That's let's even the playing field. It's in other words, it's a tragedy. My point is, it's a tragedy. Anybody that loses their life because of a drug overdose, or a drug because they were laced or made incorrectly, more so. But everybody's important. Anyway, again, bottom line, another 27. Janis Joplin, bye bye. All right, now 2 years. All right, I don't know something about that 2 year stuff. I don't know. I think there's got something going on there. But instead of 2 weeks, it's 2 years to the day of Brian Jones' death. Jim Morrison of The Doors was found dead inside a bathtub of his apartment in Paris. Not only did he share the same death day as Jones, he was also 27 years old. No autopsy was performed, and the official cause of death given was heart failure, even though it's believed he died from an overdose. And I believe his grave in Paris is one of the most visited. I can't remember which. It's a very famous graveyard or cemetery. It's one of the most, like a tourist attraction. All right, so let's go on to the next one. This other guy, all right, this is a guitarist. His name is Leslie Harvey. It's May 3rd, 1972. He's a guitarist for the Stone the Crows, and he's electrocuted when on stage at a club called the Top Rank in Swansea. He was the only one in position on the stage, and his last words to the audience were, "There's a technical hitch." Once he touched the microphone and the guitar, he fell to the ground. Later it was found someone had messed with the wires and the equipment was not grounded. The band was managed by Peter Grant, Led Zeppelin's manager, and had released 3 albums that featured raunchy blues-based rock. They released a 4th album, but without Harvey, the band dissolved. And Harvey joined the 27 Club, which, by the way, happens more than once, where one of the band members, in some cases more than one, but one of the band members dies, suicides, whatever, and that's it. Even though the band is going, it just dissolves the band. Everything is like the death of the person and the death of the band. Right? Now, ironically, before Harvey founded Stone the Crows in 1969, he was part of the Blues Council, a Scottish band who had made 1 record in March of 1965. When their tour van crashed and Fraser Calder, the singer, and bassist James Giffen were killed, the members then disbanded. So in other words, this guy is like, in other words, Leslie Harvey, he belongs to a band in 1969. All right. He makes his new band, but 4 years before, 2 of his band members die in a car accident, and that band goes, forget it, bye-bye. 4 years later, he's now Stone the Crows. 3 years after that, after, like I said, they've already got 3 albums out, he gets electrocuted. It's like, talk about bad luck, I guess you want to call that. I don't know. All right, now, the next person on the 27 Clubber, I'm telling you, you may never think, I didn't know there were that many, but there were. The next one is somebody from the Grateful Dead is named. Well, this was less than a year after Leslie Harvey gets electrocuted on stage. It's March 8th, 1973, and band member Ron Pigpen McKernan, he's the founding member of the Grateful Dead, he dies from internal bleeding. Right? By 1971, he was advised by his doctors to stop touring due to liver damage caused by his alcoholism. He was 27 when he died from a gastrointestinal hemorrhage. All right. Can you imagine how much drinking this guy had to have been doing and had done to have been in that shape only at the age of 27? Where I'm sure the doctors were telling him not to drink, but they're telling him, look, don't even tour. You need to like bed rest or something. And, there's suicide, and then there's suicide this way. When you do stuff that, eventually is going to end in your death. And, of course, he joined the 27 Club. So the next thing after that, there's a band called Badfinger, right? And before that, they were known as the Ivies, and they're a Welsh rock band that was formed in 1961. And the members were Pete Ham, the guitarist, Mike Gibbons, drums, Tom Evans, the bass, and Joey Mullen, the guitar. And fast forward, April 24th, 1975, all right, Peter Ham, he commits suicide by hanging in the garage studio in his home. At the time, the band was beset by a host of problems. He joined the 27 Club. Then, in 1983, Tom Evans also commits suicide by hanging himself in the garden of his home in Newhall, Surrey. He missed the 27 mark by a few years. Again, you think, these guys, maybe they might all be talented, but what is it about this desire for self-destruction that you're thinking, all these bands sometimes try so hard to get recognition, or back then to get signed on to a record label. And it's like, but they're so damaged in some cases where, I don't know, they never, they never get to enjoy the fruits of maybe all their hard work, despite whatever, problems they've had. But again, 27. All right, now 6 months after Peter Ham killed himself, which was in 1975, Gary Thane, all right, hold on, let me see so I could. Gary Thane, he is a bassist for the rock band Uriah Heep. Now, he dies of respiratory failure due to a heroin overdose. And the 27 Club welcomed a new member. Right? Now, here we're coming into the 1980s, and it also had its share of musicians who met an early and untimely death. All right. Now, as I said before, some of these bands, they started out with a different name, and they would dissolve, or they would get rid of some members, and then they would just rename the band. So the English rock band Led Zeppelin, which was formed in 1968, they were from the former band the band called Yardbirds, which were originally the new Yardbirds, but then they became the Yardbirds, and eventually it became Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin being considered one of the best-selling music artists of all time. On September 27, 1977, John Bonham, the drummer, was picked up by Led Zeppelin assistant Rex King to attend rehearsals. Now, during the journey, Bonham asked to stop for breakfast, where he downed 4 quadruple vodkas from 16 to 24 fluid ounces, along with a ham roll. Okay. He only takes a bite of the ham roll, and he continues to drink heavily after arriving at the studio. In other words, this excuse of, hey, stop a minute so I can have breakfast, was basically a ruse. Takes a bite of the ham roll and downs 4 vodkas. All right. So he continued drinking while they're at the studio, and the rehearsals keep going. They end late that evening. Now, after midnight, Bonham, he's fallen asleep, and they take him to bed and place him on his side. In other words, they're aware this guy, they don't want him to choke on his vomit. Almost 2 p.m. the next day, Benji Lefevre, he's the band's tour manager, and also John Paul Jones, one of the band members, they find him dead. Cause of death was asphyxiation from vomit, and the finding was accidental death. Now, prior to his death on June 27th, at a show in Nuremberg, the concert came to an abrupt halt in the middle of the third song when Bonham collapsed on stage and was rushed to the hospital. Speculation suggested that his collapse had been the result of excessive alcohol and drug use, but the band claims that he had simply overeaten. Really? Now, even though he, in December of 1980, first of all, Bonham was 32 years old when he died. He didn't die as a result of being 27. But after this, Led Zeppelin disbanded December of 1980 based on his death. That was it. That's what I'm saying. Sometimes they lose a band member, and it's even if they're at the height of their fame, that's it. The group is over. And that's what happened. He was 32, but he did die on June 27th. And maybe within a couple of years, they just call it quits and the Led Zeppelin, despite their fame. Now, the band, though, already had a history of tragedy. Check this out. 1976, Keith Relf, all right? Now, Keith Relf used to play for their earlier, the pre-Led Zeppelin, for the Yardbirds, which later evolved into Led Zeppelin. He's electrocuted while playing in his basement on an ungrounded electric guitar. He was 33 years old. The reason I bring this up is some of these bands, it's almost like, for lack of a better words, let's go down the rabbit hole. They seem to be like cursed. Dare I say? Let's use that word, cursed. Because in this thing, and honestly, maybe I just wasn't aware how easy these guys can get electrocuted. Because this happened like the other one. Leslie Harvey on an ungrounded electric guitar. All right, he's 33. And again, that Yardbirds Led Zeppelin connection is like, All right, now we're going into the 1980s. And do you have, what do you think, Henry?
What?
About all these people that are, do you think it's just bad luck or there's something...
I heard the Yardbirds. I was a big fan of the Yardbirds. The Yardbirds had amazing music, even as the Yardbirds. Mm-hmm. And that chick that died in the 60s,
Janis Joplin,
she was a mess. She was a train wreck, but she made amazing music. I had not a problem with her music. It's just that she was a train wreck. Yeah. It was only a matter of time before she actually died. Yeah. And the thing about it is, one of the things that they actually said, because since I actually play clubs and stuff, I knew a lot of people, the musicians, and they said, and we sometimes we would shoot the SH every now and then, and one of the older guys that knew Jimi Hendrix.
Okay.
When Jimi Hendrix was in New York, and Jimi Hendrix and her would do heroin for days.
See, and that's what I'm saying. Sometimes people say, "Oh, people commit suicide intentionally, like something like hanging themselves," and then I think other people let me do the scenic route suicide, which is, I know I'm doing all these drugs, and it's just a matter of time before it catches up with me. Unfortunately, sometimes I think that happens to some of these people. Which, of course, is like, why would you do that? Here you're getting all these accolades, you're making albums, you're doing concerts. Everybody's like, yay, yay, yay. But I'm telling you. And I know there's the addiction component of it, but it's a shame.
A lot of people are jealous because of their success, but they don't realize how much of a mess they are.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, let's go on to our next guy. This is, okay, we're heading now into the 1980s. And this is a gentleman, the Inner Circle Band. This is a Jamaican reggae band formed in 1968. Like other bands, they separated after the death of one of their members, the vocalist Jacob Miller. He's in a car accident on March 23rd, 1980. The Rastafari died at the age of 27, and the accident also claimed the life of one of his sons. The next one to join this group, which is the club nobody wants to belong to, unfortunately, is a Russian rock musician who's named Alexander Bashlakachev. I hope I pronounced that right. February 17th, 1988, he fell from the 9th floor window of an apartment. Though never verified as such, it's believed it was suicide since he suffered from depression. Sadly, his son Yegor, who was born a few months after his death, committed suicide in 2021. And you ask yourself, was that bad luck? Was there a predisposition genetically to maybe depression or mental illness? Or did his father's death? I mean, you never know what happens in the family dynamics, that the family suffers for it, and years later there's still repercussions. Like, when you throw a rock or in the pond that there's ripples, sometimes there's still ripples even after somebody's death. Okay, the next one is, there's a band called the Gits, and they're a punk rock band that played in the Seattle music scene in the early 1990s. And it's July 7th, 1993, and the singer, Mia Zapata, she's raped and murdered after leaving a local bar, The Comet. Now, the band breaks up after her death, and despite hiring a private detective to aid in the investigation, 9 years would pass until a new lead came in via a DNA check by the Seattle Cold Case Unit. Jesus Mesquia was linked to the crime in 2003 from DNA from a saliva sample left on Zapata's body since he had bitten her breast. In 2004, he was sentenced to 36 years in prison. She was 27 years old when she died. Now, as far as, you're saying, wow, there's a bunch of people that are part of this 27 Club. But when it really, became a thing, of course, was, with the death of Kurt Cobain. This is when the myth of the 27 Club hits the mainstream. And he dies on April 8th, 1994. Shot himself in the head in the garage of his Seattle home. Now, there was a history of suicide in Cobain's family. 2 uncles and his great uncle all killed themselves. However, it was Kurt's age that was significant. This is where that 27 Club thing starts taking off. Even though, obviously, as you could tell, that had been happening for many years. Now, then, 2 months after Cobain dies, Kristen Pfaff, she's the basis for the band Hole, who Courtney Love was a front woman for. And, of course, for those who didn't know, Courtney Love was Cobain's, I don't know if they were married, his wife. Now, this girl, Kristen Pfaff, she's the basis for their band Hole, and she's found dead in a bathtub from acute opiate intoxication. Right? She's 27. Right next to her, there's another person called Richie Edwards. He's an ex-inductee into this 27 Club. All right? And the way it works out for him is, this is within months of her death. He's the guitarist with a band called Manic Street Preachers. And he disappeared. Now, by the way, this is the weird one. He disappears on February 1st, 1995. Nobody can find him. Nowhere. Nobody can find him. Now, he's declared legally dead on May 18th, 2009. He was on Prozac when he disappeared. And his vehicle was found at the Severn View service station, which is close to the Severn Bridge, which is known as a suicide spot. And as of this day, he's never been found. They've never found. I mean, after he disappeared, there were signs. We saw him here. We saw him there. Yeah, I mean, in other words, they had to go through the courts to declare him legally dead. All right. But he, of course, was 27. Because we're going to assume that once he disappeared, that he was actually dead. Then, of course, we come to Amy Winehouse. And she's, a lot more people are more familiar because this was more recent. It's July 23rd, 2011. She dies from alcohol poisoning at the age of 27. However, she also suffered from a history of bulimia and substance abuse, and her family had feared her committing suicide due to these factors. But ironically, she had expressed to family and friends that she feared becoming one of the 27 Club. Okay, here's somebody that's self-aware, I'm 27, I don't want to be... Yeah, well, there you go. Now, as for really this, I had to include this because this has nothing to do with 27 Clubs, but this in and of itself is it's for really strange deaths. During a mid-performance in 1994, Ramon Barrero, a Mexican musician famous for playing the world's smallest harmonica, inhaled the harmonica and choked to death. I never heard of him. I couldn't even find a picture of him, but when I came across this is really weird. Talk about a horrible way to die. But yeah, his music killed him. All right. Next up is a gentleman called Chris Cornell. He doesn't die when he's 27. He's 52. He's best known as the lead vocalist and guitarist for the rock bands Soundgarden and Audioslave. Now, like many of these musicians, he struggles with depression and had multiple addictions that he was able to manage until 1997 when Soundgarden disbanded and his first marriage was failing. At that point, Cornell turns to oxycodone and other substances. And like I said, sometimes genetics does have a hand in this because both of his parents were alcoholics. Now, fast forward Right before midnight on May 18th, 2017, Cornell's bodyguard found him unconscious in the bathroom of his hotel room. And he's lying on the floor with an exercise band around his neck and blood in his mouth. Police ruled out foul play by reviewing a hotel surveillance video which showed nobody entering or exiting the suite after Cornell's bodyguard left at around 11:35 p.m. So he waited for his bodyguard to leave and hung himself, right? So, did all of these members make a deal with dark forces in exchange for fame and fortune? Did the others who died at another age, either by their own hand or prematurely, give something of themselves in order to escape anonymity and receive accolades and applause, especially those involved in the heavy metal or rock music scene? Is a description of youthful and artistic rebellion a cover for decadence and corruption, right? And we're going to look at some groups that have, like, what do you call it? A darker motif, like, in other words, some of these people was their lifestyle that you could see. But then as we get into more modern times, you see where some of the bands, like these heavy metal or black metal, I mean, there's different, they go out of their way to have that imagery. And sometimes this is the thing, there's some that you could tell is shock and awe. It's like, hey, what was it, like Gene Simmons, with his, the identity he had in Kiss. But I don't think he was like that out of there. I might be wrong. I didn't know him personally, of course, but I don't know. That kind of seemed more like that was something he was doing for a stage persona.
More makeup than anything else.
More makeup, but, it bought them,
With him, it was something like they never did drugs or anything. They just appeared to have.
Right. Well, because everybody said, oh, rock and roll band, they're going to do drugs. And I remember there was a while that, don't you remember, it was a big thing because nobody knew what they looked like without their makeup.
They started out as as without makeup, but they figured that would be their shtick, and it stuck. They just tried it once and it worked.
It worked, and that's the thing I remember. That there was a time when part of their thing was nobody knew who were these guys,
And it's funny because Gene Simmons even has toothpaste and toothbrushes.
No.
What the heck?
He
marketed himself.
He's marketing himself into everything. I think he's got bandages, band-aids.
Yeah, he does.
Something.
He does.
It's like, yeah, I know.
God bless him. Good for him.
I know. I admire that. Anyway, so here we're going. We're going to go a little bit back. This is 1982, and a group called Iron Maiden. They released their album, The Number of the Beast. Now, the records were burnt in the streets in protest when they were touring. Okay, remember, this is the 80s. People, they were coming to these towns to do concerts. And the people in the towns, first they tried burning them, then they were burnt in the street. Other times, they started smashing the records with hammers. This was the communities who were outraged because they really thought that the music, the appearance of these bands were like, satanical, devilry, you name it. There was bad stuff, bad. So now, talk about we're litigious, a litigious society. Yeah, well, and a lot of musicians that now, 40 years later, they're being looked at for sex with underage girls, even though they were groupies. Well, things have changed. So that's also what happens. Let's, like I said, Iron Maiden, this is 82. Now, Ozzy Osbourne, he was the one-time frontman for Black Sabbath. Now, he finds himself in court in 1986 following the death of a 19-year-old fan who shot himself after allegedly being influenced by the Osbourne song Suicide Solution. Ultimately, the suit's dismissed since it was found that the young man suffered from mental health problems and alcoholism, right? So things have changed now. People are, they're going to, and I know sometimes it's attorneys in the background going, hey, we might get money for this. Where they're saying, yeah, my kid maybe had a problem. He was weird or strange, but he was listening to your music 24/7. Next thing you know, he's killing himself. After this is 1985. As a matter of fact, this is a year before. Because all these, some of these court cases where these musicians are getting taken to court for certain lyrics of the songs, it would sometimes take years before the cases actually come to court between the time that they're filed and everything. But in '85, there's two young men in Reno, Nevada, and they're drinking large amounts of alcohol while listening to Judas Priest's song titled "Better by You, Better Than Me." Now, during the night, one of them places a 12-gauge shotgun under his chin and shoots himself. The other one picks up the shotgun, does the same. However, he survives but was badly disfigured. He told authorities that prior to the joint suicide attempt, they were listening to the Judas Priest song when they decided that they were better off dead. It was later asserted that a subliminal message had been inserted into the song stating, "Do it," repeatedly, and that it was this phrase that had been the trigger for the young man's tragic actions. Now, the case was dismissed the same as Ozzy Osbourne's Sweet. 3 years after the suicide attempt, the surviving man fell into a coma from a drug overdose and died. He had also suffered from depression. One of the times, I think, was it Ozzy Osbourne? Because one of the things that they look at in these songs are their subliminal messages. I think it was Ozzy Osbourne who made a comment like, "Oh, if I was going to put a subliminal message, why would I want to kill my own fans, like the people that buy my records?"
Yeah, he said something along the lines.
Right.
His subliminal message is "Give me money."
And I think that, and I want to say, I think Uriah Heep was, they said to, like, they would say, "Oh, if I was going to put a subliminal, and buy more records or buy my record."
It started out as a joke, and they put a little message, thinking that nobody would take it seriously, and nobody will actually do the spin the record backward. When I was a DJ, we tried that once, and it actually was true. It had a little message, but nobody took it seriously.
Well, but no, in the Uriah Heep one, there was a subliminal message. Nothing of this backward stuff, because it became that, where he was something, do it now. The thing is, do what? I guess depends what frame of mind you're in. That if you're thinking of committing suicide and you're hearing somebody saying, do it, subliminally, especially something you're hearing over and over again.
If you have mental issues, you're going to take it the
wrong way. Well,
way.
You know what? And I believe the judge, the way he looked at it was, it infringes on the freedom of speech, free expression. And you can't account for if somebody has mental illness or is under the influence of drugs, what's going on in their head. But anyway, yeah. So, all right. And now this is 1995, and this is where also it's a group influence. There's a girl named Elsie Paler. She's 15, and she's lured to a remote spot to smoke pot by 3 boys: Royce Casey, 17, Jacob Delashmut, 16, and Joseph Fiorella, 15, where they torture and kill her. She would be considered missing for 8 months until Casey confessed to the crime. He was driven by the fear that his 2 companions in crime were planning to kill him. So he takes authorities to where her body could be found. Part of his confession included information that they belonged to a band named Hatred. And they believed that ritual murder would enhance their music. The ultimate goal was to, quote, receive power from the devil to help them play guitar better, end quote. Sound familiar? Anyway, they were heavily influenced by thrash metal band Slayer. They had strangled the girl with a belt and then stabbed her several times with a large hunting knife. Further details reveal that in her final minutes, with the 3 killers watching her, Elsie prayed to God for help. Even worse, there was evidence to suggest that at least one of the killers had sexually assaulted Elsie in the hours following her death, although this was not proven in court. There were also accusations of necrophilia. In 1997, all 3 were sentenced to 25 and 26 years in prison. Okay. And this is the thing you're thinking. The only reason this comes to light is because one of them is thinking, I'm next. These guys are going to do me in. And obviously, he thinks that the only ones that can help him are the police. And I didn't do enough to see, was he making stuff up in his head and these people weren't planning to do him in as 2 other guys? Or was he on the target? And who knows if they had already noticed something about him and said, this guy is going to blab. Before he does, it's over for him. Mm-hmm. But yeah. So the previous year, this is in November of 1996, Elsie's parents, this is the criminal aspect, are the guys that killed her. They file a lawsuit against Slayer, the band Slayer, and they claim that the band's lyrics incited the three killers. They asserted that two of the group's songs, specifically Postmortem and Dead Skin Mask, had encouraged the trios to, quote, stalk, rape, torture, murder, and commit acts of necrophilia, end quote. The case came to court in 2000 and was dismissed. So every time that they try to go after these groups for somehow encouraging, producing, influencing violent acts, it gets dismissed. So, but now and sometimes you wonder, I doubt that if you're okay, you're going to be influenced by a song. I don't care how dark. You have to either have psychopath already, and then, it doesn't take much to push you or to do something from talking to doing. Now, let's go to, it's May of 1993, and the location is West Memphis, Arkansas. There's three guys, Steve Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Byers. All three are 8 years old, and they go missing. All right. The police and a volunteer force searched through the night, and it wasn't until the following day that a shoe was seen floating on the water around a place called Robin Hood Hills. The three boys are found in a drainage ditch. They were naked and hogtied with their shoelaces. Their clothes were found wrapped around sticks and buried in the ground as a type of marker. Now, autopsies of the bodies found they had died from multiple injuries and drowning, and one of the boys had his genitals mutilated.
Wow.
Now, the following day, this is May 7th, Damian W. Eccles, he's 18. He's interviewed by police. Now, he was known for liking heavy metal music, horror films, and he preferred to wear mostly black. He was interested in witchcraft. Now, afterward, his friends, Jason Baldwin, 16, and Jesse Miss Kelly Jr., 17, they're arrested. Now, Miss Kelly, he tells police that one of the boys was likely mutilated more than the others. At the time he gave his statement, the mutilation of the boy had not been made public. And this seemed to be a sure sign they were the perpetrators, even if his statement was just a lucky guess. This is what they were saying. Later on, it's like, of all the things, because you know how sometimes police will withhold certain facts just to figure out, like, hey, we'll know if somebody knows about this, that they were there. So was this, well, you don't want to call it a lucky guess. It's more like an unlucky guess. He's saying one of these kids was mutilated in his private parts, and it turns out that that's exactly what had happened. So bottom line, now he ultimately confesses to the murders, which he further claimed also involved Eccles and Baldwin. Miss Kelly claimed that the trio had engaged in satanic rituals that often involved orgies, initiation rites, and murder, and it would later come to light that Miss Kelly had an IQ of around 70. All right. Now, in 1994, all three of them get convicted in connection to the death of Christopher Byers, Michael Moore, and Steve Branch the previous year. Eccles was subsequently sentenced to death. Miss Kelly was sentenced to life imprisonment plus 2 20-year sentences, and Baldwin was sentenced to life imprisonment. Now, their case drew the attention of many rock and heavy metal musicians because, of course, the inference is that, of course, behind their acts was the heavy metal scene. Now, fast forward to 2004. Examiners find a human hair on the shoe of Michael Moore that did not belong to any of the students. These three. 2 private investigators zeroed in on Terry Hobbs. Steve Branch being one of the boys. That was his stepdad. Because his story did not add up. He had claimed that he had begun searching for the boys at 6 p.m. on the day they had disappeared, when in reality they had only been reported missing at 9 p.m. Their suspicions were seemingly confirmed with the DNA from a cigarette they lifted from his home was a match with the hair they found on Michael's shoe. However, it was ruled that since the boys all played together often at one another's home, it was within reason that Hobbs' hair could have gotten in any of their shoes, which, by the way, sounds very possible. That's not a far stretch at all. This evidence allowed the 3 convicts to proclaim their innocence while admitting the prosecution had enough evidence to convict them. They were set free. So who did kill the boys? There were several suspects, but no arrests were made. Again, I didn't go directly. I know that they've made a documentary on this killing, and I really haven't gotten enough to see. If they were convicted just on this one kid, I don't know. I don't want to go one way or the other, but it makes me think, was there more evidence? And that's how they ended up getting convicted. Just because what the kid is goth and listens to hard metal music, whatever, and the other kid and the other one's got an IQ of 70 and I don't know, implicates the other two. I don't know. There's something there that doesn't add up. Like, were they really innocent? If they were, I don't know. I would think that they would need more evidence than that, but so, some of the most brutal connections between horrendous deaths and heavy metal music occurred during the second wave of the Norwegian black metal scene in the early 1990s. While the initial wave of black metal in Norway began in the early 1980s with reference to Satan and Satanism in their respective lyrics, they went into anything that was anti-Christian, whatever it was. Now, one of the most popular bands was one called Mayhem, all right, which was formed in the early 1980s, and their vocalist Per Ingev Olin used the stage name Dead. He would wear corpse paint while performing and would wear clothes that had been buried to give the appearance of a corpse. His bandmates soon realized that it wasn't just an act, and that he went through bouts of depression, which included self-harm. On April 8th, 1991, Dead was found dead in a room in a house where they were rehearsing. He had slit his wrist and his throat. This didn't kill him, so he shot himself in the head. Then a bandmate by the name of Euronymous, he finds the body. What does he do? He rushes out, gets a disposable camera, and photographs the body. This guy, slit wrist, slit throat, and shot in the head. Many in the black metal scene were critical of Euronymous and his actions and claimed he was trying to profit by his bandmate's death. But what do they say about karma? Several years later, one of the photos taken was used as cover artwork for a bootleg album of the band titled Dawn of the Black Hearts. Now, Euronymous became one of the most controversial figures in the Norwegian black metal scene and a person of significant interest to the authorities, who had begun to undertake an active investigation into the scene, specifically due to several cases of arson at churches. Remember why I said it wasn't that they're just doing this on their faces or their artwork. Everything was anti-Christian. So anyway, now he comes into conflict with other people in the band, one of them including someone named Christian Verkenes. He's a black metal musician who had joined Mayhem in 92, right? Now, the men increased in their disagreement, and in 1993, Verkenes, along with another guy named Snor Ruch, these are Norwegian names, okay, went to Euronymous' apartment in Oslo. There's a confrontation, and Euronymous is stabbed to death. See what I mean about karma? Now, Verkenes said it was a case of self-defense and that he had gone to speak to Euronymous because he feared the other man was planning to torture and kill him. Verkenes was sentenced to 21 years in prison, and the black metal scene broke up. Mayhem is not alone in their blatantly dark themes. But in other words...
It's weird, though.
Okay, again. Now, then there's another... This, by the way, this is Euronymous. He was not apologetic about, because let me tell you something. You find one of your bandmates has done such a horrible thing, and you run off and get a disposable camera, and because remember, this is early 90s. This is pre-cellular phone with camera. So
believe it or not, it's
So anyway, now there's a bunch of other bands that they're like blatantly dark themes. All right, there's one called Narration. It's a Norwegian musician. He's a founding member. Well, he took the stage name, of Narration. And he's the founding member of a band called Carpathian Forest. It's a black metal band, and he first started with a band called the Child Molesters. That was their name. Which was also another metal band, which he founded in 1990. All right, that's one of the bands. There's another one, Morbid Angel. This is an extreme death metal band. They debuted their first album, Altars of Madness, in 1989, and they're based out of Florida. And according to the New Times, they are, quote, steeped in the occult and worship of the beast, but have moved towards more dark spiritual and esoteric themes such as Sumerian deities, mythology, and even ancient incantations and witchcraft. End quote. Okay, I guess that means it's all better now. I'm just going real, some of these bands into their, they're so far, I mean, they'll make the papers for, or the news for something. Another band, they're called the Electric Hellfire Club, or EHC. Thomas Thorne, of course, is the stage name, aka Buck Ryder from My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult, formed this obscure alternative electro-industrial metal band of evil hippies in Wisconsin in 1991. The EHC makes music repeatedly makes reference to serial killers, mass murder, devil worship, carnal lust, orgies, and drug abuse. Thorne is literally an ordained priest in the Church of Satan, and even gave a eulogy for the church's creator, Anton LaVey, when he died in 1997. Aww. Okay, next band is called Satirikan, like Satyr. Norwegian black metal band Satirikan was obsessed with medieval history since its formation in the early 90s. With the first several albums focusing on forests and castles, the band developed a sound that is today as sinister as black metal. Another band that's up there is called Marduk. All right. Marduk takes the band name from an ancient Babylonian god. Marduk is a black metal band from Sweden, formed in 1990. The band themes include religious and philosophical Satanism, anti-Christianity, and a dark look into the past, including brutal memories of World War II. One of the band's infamous early demo covers depicts a nun using a crucifix to masturbate in the words whatever, ends with K, me Jesus. A few choice songs titles include Jesus Christ Sodomized, Death, Sex Ejaculation, Burn My Coffin, Blessed Unholy, and With Satan and Victorious Weapons. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. That's what, wow. And another group is Behemoth. They're from Poland, and they were formed in 91, and they merged mysticism and the image of black metal with the force, precision, and brutality of death metal that explores ancient anti-Christian themes as well as other satanic philosophies. They produced their last album in 2022. Then the other groups, there's one called Brujeria, which is Spanish and translates into witchcraft. All right. And they are long known as a cult band and are rumored to be made up of actual Mexican satanic drug lords. The lyrics are in Spanish, and the band is known for such shocking musical tales as narco satánicos, or which is satanic drug dealers, or narco satanists, really is what it is. Molestando niños muertos, molesting dead children. Almas de venta, souls for sale. And sesos humanos sacrificio, human brain sacrifice, among many others. Their 1993 album was titled Matando Güeros, or Killing White Boys, which featured a real picture of a man's decapitated, rotting head on the cover. This led the FBI to question the band members on how they obtained the gruesome photo. Wow. Let me tell you something, that's not that unusual, but yes, very, very, very dark. Then there's another band called Dark Funeral. And the band emerged from Sweden in the early 90s with grim music promoting a masochistic and violent lifestyle, such as murder, church burnings, Satanism, self-mutilation, suicide, drug abuse, and even in some cases homophobia and racism. They have symphonic black metal hymns dedicated to hatred, misanthropy, devil worship, and the black arts. And then the last one that I found was, it's Decide. This is the death metal band formed in 1987 in Tampa, Florida. Oh. From their inception, they presented a musical homage to Satan, offering up a confrontational, overly satanic attack against Christianity. With each album and live show, the band's name literally means the killing of God, with lyrics that are blasphemous. Glenn Benton, who's a founding member and bassist, branded an inverted cross into his forehead to prove his loyalty to the devil. I'm telling you. Early in the band's career, Decide was hounded by church protests, animal rights groups who alleged animal torture, and even several lawsuits alleging the music influenced suicide, crime, and even murder. They are scheduled to release a new album in 2024. All right, so many blame the Satanic Panic for giving hard metal bands a bad name. But in truth, many bands were more than happy enough to adopt the devil and the occult as part of their images. It was only after lawsuits and weird deaths and suicides that many of them distanced themselves from the motif. But was it just an attempt to be ultra and controversial that these bands took up the black mantle, or does evil spread its influence through heavy metal music? What do you think, Henry? Do you think that there's more to it than just, in other words, that that it's just more than an act, or in some case they get so involved in it that it actually bounces back on them?
See, yes and no. There is a lot of bands that to them is image. It's not the act. It's not. They don't do that. It's just like a facade to sell albums.
Right.
They don't mean any harm. But then you got people with mental problems that actually take that to the next level and take that seriously. And it's not cool.
Of course.
When I used to run clubs and we had rock bands and stuff come there, and they will tell you, don't take it seriously.
Yeah.
They will come in like regular people with flannel shirts, and then you see them on stage. You're like, what the?
Oh shoot! Something went down. Okay, don't worry, I'll pick it up. I just have a cup with all my pens. And my dogs are just like, wow, you're crazy lady. But anyway.
And then the owner of the club
hire. You're talking about the devil on Halloween. Okay, no.
And then the owner of the club will hire sometimes bands. He was Greek. He will hire bands without actually vetting them and didn't know. And then when we actually saw the name of the band, we're like, oh, this is not good.
Well, you know what? Well, look at this other guy that's banned, this guy's branded, not tattooed, branded, an inverted cross on his forehead. I'm thinking, what? And I'm thinking to myself, was he anesthetized? I can't imagine. I don't know. And I'm saying they must spend a fortune on black eyeliner.
One of the guys that he actually hired there, that we actually talked to, because he would just hire the bands and leave.
Right.
And then we had to deal with it. Had a tattoo of a kid hanging upside down from his neck.
See, that's the kind of stuff that I don't know.
And we had to actually tell him, no.
Yeah, it's not gonna go over well.
You could get upset, people. No, because thing about it is, it would attract the wrong crowd that we don't want to.
Plus, I imagine, you know what? I imagine there's people that go to the club and they're gonna look at that and they go, no, man. Forget that.
No, and the thing, sometimes people that will be in their 30s and 40s will go to the club and they're like, what the heck, Henry? You know, it's like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah.
This is not what we come here for.
Like, yeah, we're here to come and dance and drink and have a good time. And that's weighing me out to look at that.
Eat, drink, dance, not be insulted with stuff like that.
Or this is disturbing. It's like, you don't, that's what I'm saying. There's, I think, I don't know. There's got to be something in your mental processes that I don't know. Maybe I'm too vanilla. What do you think, Henry?
No, yeah, and these people would actually burn stuff on stage and stuff. I'm like, dude, we do not. We have fire codes. This is unacceptable.
Yeah, and this, because everybody's seeing, some of these rock groups that smash the guitar, and it's like, okay, what else you playing? You need to do something over the top, so everybody goes, that's so what?
Like the Who did that. It's a bunch of bands, but it's all for show. They will have like crappy guitars that they would actually destroy on stage.
Yeah.
For appearances, just to make it look dramatic.
Yeah.
But that's about as far as it went.
Exactly. So again, is like, but some of these, and my question is, some of these people, regardless of if they were well upstairs or not, but decided they were going to go back then in counterculture, which drug experimentation, and then later on all these heavy metal bands, that they went there thinking they wanted to be edgy, and in other words, that thing, you look into the abyss and the abyss looks back. Did that lifestyle, or them thinking, hey, I'm gonna do whatever I want, did it bounce back and in some cases kill them, drove them to excessive drug use? I don't know.
Like,
That's what that's the question that everybody thinks. Who was master and who was the apprentice? Here you're thinking, I'm going to say like the 60s, which was the free sex, free love, whatever, the sexual revolution, do all the drugs you want, especially if you were into like a rock and roll star, whatever. Nobody said no to you, in other words. And then, of course, there's others that whether you want to call it excessive, whatever it is, excess, and all these like dark metal bands that basically they're like death and Satanism and anti-Christianity. I'm thinking to myself, how come they're never anti-Buddhist or anti-Muslim? It's always the Christian thing, right? If you're a Satanist or Luciferian or something, it's like, because by the way, these other religions believe in God. It's not like the Christians are the only ones that believe in God.
They might have a little different name for it,
but they believe in God. They're not Christians. They don't believe Jesus Christ is Messiah, whatever. But they have a belief in God as an ultimate whatever. You never hear any of these bands, which, by the way, I didn't know Norway and Sweden had so many dark bands there, that it's like they're anti-Christian, all right?
Mm-hmm. Like a lot of people that think that Ozzy Osbourne really bit the head of a bat, and that was so a show.
You look at Ozzy Osbourne now, and it's like he's mumbling. And what did he say?
And it was so special effects.
But that's what I'm saying. Back then, that's what I'm saying. There was a picture the other day that I found of him, and his kids are little kids, and he's sitting on the sofa with his still present wife, which is another thing. Most of these marriages don't last. They no makeup, no nothing, and you could tell he was a dad. And it was like, that's where you see, this thing with all this weird stuff, that's for the stage. That's the stage life. I know he did drugs, but right there when he was sitting with his kid and his wife,
he even says
he didn't look like
he says that thank God to his wife, he's able to live and have grandkids.
Right? Yeah, he has grandkids now, and they showed it. As a matter of fact, I saw a picture of him with his grandkid, and I guess they must understand mumbling because that's what he does now. What?
It takes him a minute to actually pronounce.
So words. Anyway, guys, it's something to think about for Halloween. These people live the Halloween lifestyle year round, and sometimes they became part of the club. And that's another thing. How much of that is coincidence that so many of them ended their days at the age of 27? Because remember, some of these people that died in 27, there was no official recognition of the 27 club. It wasn't them saying, I'm going to subconsciously kill myself or whatever when I'm 27, so I'll be part. No, this was Kurt Cobain. His death is the one that got that list going. So what was it? What was it about that 27 number? So anyway, guys, happy Halloween. Okay. Hopefully pretty soon will be Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, the holidays, and then we'll be in 2025. And probably our next show will be Mardi Gras for February or something. I got to look at the Mardi Gras date. But again, please come back every week. I've got a lot of interesting guests coming on. And we will see you soon. Till next time. Say bye, Henry. Bye, you guys.